Good morning. Thank you, Francis. Yes, so my name is Christopher Upton. I'm an agricultural scientist, forest scientist. I've also got some economics hidden away somewhere, and I'm currently lecturing on soil biology, which is, as you'll probably see quite soon, a bit of my passion here. But I want to start with this first slide. Apart from the fact you get to see a picture of me, which is always a good thing, and this is a trial. This is a trial of kale, and it is a trial looking at how we can use kale and increase its nutrient density so that it has a longer shelf life and it can be used as a nutritional supplement in a powdered form. So this trial looks at lots of different varieties of kale, and there's two interesting things here that we're going to come back to. The first one is that the level of testing required to get a good understanding of what we mean by nutrient density is actually incredibly expensive. And we need to think about, and this is where the technology needs to come in, we need to think about ways of providing farmers with much easier and cheaper ways of testing what is growing in the field. One of the problems we have is this huge amount of variability. If I test this kale in the morning, I will get a different result than if I test it in the afternoon, because photosynthesis would have changed the composition in the kale leaves, which is the bit I'm interested in. The other thing is about this kale is the bits I'm really interested in are the phytonutrients, the antioxidants, the stuff that we need to keep us healthy. And we also know that plants will only produce these when they are subjected to environmental stress. So that's why people say, eat your sprouts after a frost, or eat your kale after a frost. So I know if I've had a bit of a dry patch, I'm going to get more phytonutrients. So this affects the way I water my crops and how I manage it. So I think you can start to see a picture emerging. If the farmer had access to that information about when during the day and as a result of which particular environmental stresses the phytonutrient levels were absolutely at their top level, we could start to produce healthy crops in quite a cheap and effective way. But it does require the testing to be much, much cheaper. Part of the problem with the testing is it's our mindset. We want to know how much of something is in a product. We want to know how much vitamin C is in those kale leaves. But what we should be asking is how effective is the process that is producing the vitamin C? How can we measure the process? If we know the process is working very effectively, we will get the vitamin C. And this opens the route to a much more cost-effective and cheaper way of testing, which some of you may know, which is quite an emerging field, something called, this is going to be a big word, metabolomics, the only big word I'm going to use. The other point on this thing, this is small scale. These are field scale vegetables. I could grow 10 hectares of whichever variety ends up being the one I want to grow. And that is what I call the business model, the concentration business model. Bigger is more efficient. Bigger makes more money. Bigger is more profitable. But instead, we are going to change the business model. And we talk a lot about innovation in terms of technology, and I've just talked about the need for innovation in testing, but we also need an innovation in business models. So this kale is going to be grown by small farmers, and I'm going to replicate the area and not concentrate the area. We have a customer. It is totally sales driven. Most farmers are not sales driven, they are grower driven, and they can only sell because they sell commodities, and they sell into commodity markets. They are not good, most of them, at marketing, and they are not good at sales. It is not their skill set, but they are really good at growing. So if you help them grow and you remove the sales and marketing function from these farmers and replicate amongst a lot of small farmers, you're going to start to tick a few boxes. You're going to become more resilient, you're going to increase biodiversity, and most importantly, you're going to stimulate rural communities. And I don't know about the rest of the world, but certainly in Europe, we have a real problem and decline of the rural fabric. And we have to somehow find ways to stimulate interest and keep young people on the land. Otherwise, we will lose a lot of our cultural values. So this slide, we'll talk about some other stuff eventually, but this encapsulates two of the big ideas I want to talk about. So just get some context. We've talked a little bit about this, resilience. We need resilience. Put profit over yield, because if you don't put profit over yield, your risks are going to be high. So resilience is really important. We need to adapt. We're having real problems with water. And it's not just about the availability of water, it's about when it happens. In the UK this year, we've had an incredibly wet summer and a really dry spring, the opposite of what farmers need to actually grow crops. Same amount of rain, just came at the wrong time, which is good. Changing food requirements. We will need to eat less meat. Not much, but we will need to eat less meat. And how is that going to work? We need to work it out. So we can't really talk about the future of agriculture without talking about the future of food. And we need to get away from always measuring the performance of agriculture in terms of quantity. We need to somehow start talking about quality as well as quantity. I don't quite know how that's going to work, but you guys can maybe help me figure that out. I just know we've got to do it. So let's just start to think about you. And I think this will help us understand what the farmer's actually dealing with. And let's think about you as an evolutionary set of molecules and things that you walk around the place and you're all different and we've all got brains and all the rest of it, very good. But actually, when you really start to think about it, most of you is not you. So only 10% of the cells of your body are actually what you're carrying or what's in you, and even a smaller proportion of the genetic material that you have is compared to what you are carrying with you around. So if you look at this, you've got less than 1% of the genetic material of your body is what is in you and on you. And there's been a lot of stuff in the press and in the media about the gut biome. There's probiotics you can buy now and all sorts of supplements, and we're supposed to eat fermented food and whatever. And this is all about nurturing the gut biome, because we know that a healthy gut biome makes us healthy. But if you look at those numbers, you think, what are these microbes up to? Have we been taken for a ride here? Who's in charge? So think about it. When you're hungry, are you really hungry? I've got plenty of reserves. I could ease it, but I get hungry. So why do I get hungry? I get hungry because some microbe in my gut wants some food. And that pesky microbe sends a message up to my brain and says, tell this stupid human to go and get some food. I'm hungry. So I go and get some food, and I go off to wherever it is, and I have a pizza or something like that. And 2 hours later, I'm hungry again. And that pesky microbe says, look, that silly human ate pizza, and I didn't get any cobalt, or I didn't get any boron, I didn't get this micronutrient that I really need. So I'm going to tell him I'm hungry again. So I've had plenty of calories. I'm up to here. I'm over the top with calories, but I still go out and get another slice of pizza. And this is why the nutrient density of food is so important. If we don't get this right, our healthcare systems are going to collapse, because we have become addicts in order to satiate the microbes in and on our body. And this is something that we need to be really careful with. Now, think if you're a plant, you don't have a gut. I'm a little plant. But before we arrived, think, dinosaurs 60 million years ago? Let's think, little plant 60 million years ago. We were not there to mess things up. So we can't be blamed for that one. So the little plant, and the plant's growing fine. It's got no Haber-Bosch process to help it grow. It's absolutely fine. It's growing really well. And the reason why it's growing really well is it has the soil as its gut. And all the microbes in the soil are feeding that plant with all the micronutrients and things it needs. So if we disrupt the soil by tillage, mostly, or by applying chemicals, we are disrupting the plant's biome, the plant's gut, in exactly the same way that we disrupt our own gut by eating the wrong types of food, or filling our gut with antibiotics, for example. That kind of thing. So that's really important. We're going to come back to microbes because I'm really keen on microbes, so don't forget microbes. Just some drivers we need to talk. We know about climate change, but just we need to remind ourselves, because we forget, we're, as humans, we're naturally quite optimistic, and we keep thinking, well, it's all going to be fine tomorrow, but actually it isn't. And we need to be realistic. So this graph, I keep using the same graph, it's 2018, but actually it's got worse. So this is only CO2. This is one of the greenhouse gases. So we've never lived, as a species, we have never existed at all. We have never existed with the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere. It's now up to about 200, it's now 407, it's now about 480, the concentration of CO2. And this is before we talk about methane, and before we talk about water as other greenhouse gases. So we do have a problem, and we need to be able to do something about it. So this climate change thing is not going to go away. That's number one. Number two, ecosystems, biodiversities. We keep forgetting about this. Now, this is one of the issues that we need to bear in mind with all the ag tech speak, if you like. A lot of the ag tech stuff that I get involved in and goes across my desk is based on monocultures. How is that approach going to deal with this problem? How is ag tech going to deal with biodiversity? I mean, it could be that we don't need the land to grow monocultures, so we can just let nature rewild. Well, it could be one option, but we need to address it. And I don't think that if ag tech cannot deal with this issue, it doesn't really fit in. So we need to address that. I think this thing at the bottom is absolutely extraordinary, that 90% of all mammals are now domestic, compared to 200 years ago when they were wild. So the biomass of chickens and pigs and cows is now 90% of all animals on the planet, compared to a couple of hundred years ago. But that, of course, has a massive impact on biodiversity. The actual real crisis is in microbes and insects, which is why a lot of birds have disappeared. We're facing mass extinctions of amphibians and birds and all sorts of things, because we've killed the soil in many instances. So that's number two, biodiversity. Number three, nutrition. This is one of my favorite slides. This is it's not a great resolution, I'm afraid, but it's some work done by Dr. David Johnson, New Mexico State University. And this gives you an idea of what is happening, or what has happened to the bioflora in our gut. So the top one is Tanzania, hunter-gatherer. So this could have been you 10,000 years ago, something like that. Somebody running around Spain 10,000 years ago, Paleolithic man, with that kind of distribution. And you can see that the colors are skewed towards the left. And these are microbes that focus on fiber in the diet. So 10,000 years ago, Paleolithic Spain, guys running around the place, eating lots of berries, all sorts of roots and things like that, killing the odd whatever it is they could find, but heavily a diet based on fiber, and very diverse. Lots of variety, lots of diversity. Diversity is resilience. Now just imagine if we had that diet today combined with what we know in terms of modern medicine. How would we all feel? Just think about that for a minute. Wouldn't it be great? So that's maybe something we should be aiming for in agriculture. Can we recreate somehow that diet? Anyway, this poor guy running around Spain 10,000 years ago, wind the clock forward, a couple of 100 years ago, he moves to Madrid or wherever. He moves to the capital city. This is data from Malawi and Venezuela. So suddenly, no berries to pick and all that sort of stuff. Start eating bread, polenta, or whatever it is. And the diet shifts from being a fiber-based diet to a carbohydrate-based diet. There's still a reasonable amount of variety, and it's not too bad. But you can see a massive shift. Now, and this is so the impact of diet on the gut flora is huge. We then move to the United States of America, and actually the UK as well. UK has the dubious privilege of being the only country in Europe where more than 50% of all the food is not made at home. So it is bought either in a pub or as a ready meal from a supermarket. So, and look at that, very, very heavily dependent. So we have huge reduction in diversity, a complete change in gut flora. We are eating a diet, we are consuming food for which we were not evolved to survive with. So what we do, of course, is spend huge amounts of money on healthcare systems to put it right. But instead of treating the problem with medicine, why don't we work on public health to prevent it happening in the first place? And this is where agriculture comes in. So, number 4, it's about us. So this is Molly. So she's great. Molly's really good. I thought I've got to promote Molly. So she's got this farm, 100 acres, Surrey, just south of London. She's one of the bright minds, quite lucky. She went to Cambridge, did a degree in geography. She's also fortunate, and she works on sustainability and things like this. But her family farm, and this is the key issue, her family farm was losing money. 100 acres is not big in the UK. She comes along and says, look, Dad, it's all a mess. We've got to change the way we do things. And she starts thinking about ecology instead of units of nitrogen. And suddenly, bit by bit, remove the word suddenly, bit by bit, the farm turns itself around and is now profitable. And this is what we need. We need Mollies. We need hundreds of thousands of Mollies who are going to be thinking like an ecologist. This article comes from the Farmers Weekly, which is the main magazine in the UK that farmers will read. And the fact that they even printed it, I think, is absolutely extraordinary. So there is a bit of a seismic shift in things. But we need to move away from what I call recipe farming. And this is a little bit analogous to your dinner lady. This is somebody who will follow the instructions on the back of a packet to either produce a meal or to grow a crop. And the farmers need to start thinking, okay, what is my land like? Where is the water? What are the species? What is going on here? And we need to think much more in terms of systems. And this links into what I said earlier about the testing of kale. Don't get so obsessed with measuring quantity. Think in terms of systems. We need to make it interesting. Farming, I started farming. I left farming. It was so boring. I started off growing sugarcane in East Africa, and it was really boring. We just followed instructions. And I thought, hang on, I want to get to grips with all this. So I stopped. I'm really passionate and fired up now because it's suddenly become interesting because it's all about ecology. And I think if we can push this through the education system and the agricultural colleges, we will make agriculture interesting and rewarding, and we will attract young people. In order to keep those young people on the land, we have to have small-scale business models that are profitable. And this is absolutely critical. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about replicating profitable small farms rather than concentrating into much larger farms. So those are the drivers. Right, I put this up because this is to get everybody thinking a bit. I've put the one at the top, which is a bit I like best, which is regenerative agriculture, because for me it ticks all the boxes. It ticks the climate change box, it ticks the biodiversity box, it ticks engaging young people in agriculture, and it produces nutrient-dense food. Now, how do we make it profitable? How do we make it easy for farmers to adopt? And I think this is where ag tech comes in, which are the things I've put in red. So I don't think precision agriculture, robotics, and data in their own right are actually that useful. I got so much data. There's a company I'm working with from, it's a spin-out from York University called AgriSounds, and it measures the wavelengths that pollinators emit as they fly around. I get a monthly report from them. It's just huge. It's a massive, great spreadsheet, and I'm looking at it, I think, so what? Who cares? But if I had the tools to know what it meant and how I could use it to grow more crops and so on and so forth, then I get interesting. So I think if we can come up with ways where the ag tech can kind of feed in and become a tool to make regenerative agriculture even more profitable and accessible, really important accessibility, then we've got something really interesting. I'm worried about vertical and indoor farming, and I'll tell you why. It's good for water, no doubt about it, but we've got 3 processes that are happening in the soil. We've got physics, chemistry, and biology. Now, we're quite clever, and we can replicate the physics and the chemistry, more or less. Can we replicate the biology? Can we replicate the millions of chemical reactions and biochemical products that are being produced every second? Are we clever enough to do that? Because if we can't, we will not get those phytonutrients. So we've got to be careful with vertical farming and indoor farming. And the same thing with plant-based meats and all these very heavily processed products. Will they have the phytonutrients that we need to shift our gut biomes into that Paleolithic state? I don't know the answer to that. Waste reduction, huge, massive, totally agree. We've got to do something about it. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. One thing we haven't talked about is why do people waste food? It often doesn't taste very nice, actually. But I do know, having measured the shelf life of that kale, that if it is picked at the right time, and it has got the right level of phytonutrients, its shelf life will be about 2 weeks compared to 3 days. If I buy kale grown conventionally, it will wilt in my fridge and start to change color in 2 to 3 days. The kale, if it's grown properly and carefully, will last up to, let's say 2 weeks to be on the safe side. The same is true of lettuce. That could make a massive difference. Same with bread, actually. Bread is one of the biggest culprits. Bread is one of the big waste things. If you can keep bread going without chemicals, because a lot of the bread makers inject the loaves with chemicals to make them last longer, if you can grow bread with nutrient-dense grains, you'd be surprised. Try it. Make some bread at home. But make sure you're using flour that is stone ground and comes from an organic farm. You'll be surprised how long that bread lasts compared to what you get from the shops. Right, we're going to go back to microbes now. So we've talked about us and the problems that we have in our gut. So I'm just going to finish off here with about how plants do it. So plants are really not very clever, to start with, at least. So the first plants, 350 million years ago, way before the dinosaurs, did not have roots. So you imagine you're a plant, you've got no roots. You've got a few leaves, you're flapping around in the water, but no roots. And this is really important. And you can do one thing. You can convert, with the help of a bit of sunlight, you can convert CO2 and a little bit of water, and you can make sugar. But that's like eating Mars bars all day long. You need something else from time to time. You cannot survive. If you just ate Mars bars, you would start to feel a little bit ill very quickly. You need other things. So you team up with these creatures called fungi. And the fungal mycelium basically act as your roots. And you say to the fungi, I'll tell you what, guys, I can make sugar. If I give you, say, half of the sugar I make, will you give me everything else I need? And the fungi says, yes, this is a really good deal because I need sugar, because I need carbon. Without carbon, I can't make my mycelium, I have no cell walls, I can't function. So you give me carbon, I'll give you everything else. And that deal worked really well until we arrived. It was fantastic. It grew incredible forests and ferns, probably as high as this building. It was absolutely wonderful. So that's how it kind of worked. Now the problem we've got is fungal mycelium are very sensitive to disturbance. So if you dig up some soil or plow, or even just pull out a plant out of the soil, you will rip apart those fungal networks, those mycelium. So you will remove from the plant its ability to get hold of the nutrients that it needs. And the only way you can, so this is the same, if you plow up a field, first couple of years it's fine because you've got all these dead microbes and dead plants that are decomposing and the plant gets nutrients from that. But then the fertility drops. Every farmer will tell you. So what does the farmers do? They replace the fungi with manure, if it's organic, or with artificial fertilizers. And the plant says, whoa, I've got these new friends. I don't need you fungi. Deal's off. And the cycle starts, the problems start. So the plants then become addicted to nitrogen. The plants become addicted to farmyard manure, actually, uncomposted minerals. They take up nitrogen too quickly. And so they have too many amino acids. They don't have any proteins. Or insects love amino acids. Guess what happens? Insects go, this is breakfast. Farmer says, I've got to go out and kill some insects today. Farmer starts spraying. Everything else dies as well. And we end up where we are. Doesn't take very long. 200 years, basically. So what we need to do is focus on the soil biology. The plants are quite happy by themselves. They really do not need our help as long as we get the soil biology right. And for me, the soil biology ticks all those boxes in the drivers. You increase biodiversity because you've got a really vibrant community of bacteria and fungi and protozoa and earthworms and microarthropods and beetles. And it's incredible what can happen. It takes 2 or 3 years. Actually, within 6 months, you will get change. But it takes about 4 years. That kale trial, before we could run the kale trial, we had to spend 4 years improving the soil and getting the soil biology up to a level where it would generate the phytonutrients. Soil structure, it reduces flooding, infiltration, the erosion in Spain. Come on, guys, we've got to stop this. And then what we've got to do is get the water to go in the ground, not off the ground. Farmers are obsessed with drainage. They should be obsessed with infiltration. There are good ways of doing this. And again, if you change the pH around the root, you don't have weeds and so on. Anyway, I'm not going to read this for you. You can read it. But it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. In a horticultural environment, if you get the biology right, there's no digging, really expensive. No weeds, really expensive. You can focus on planting and harvesting. And there we go. Thank you very much.